My brother tried to steal my $478,000 house with a fake lease. Then Mom said I should just give it to him, and I'm Delia, 36 years old, and I've worked as an account manager in Cleveland for over a decade now. The job's nothing glamorous, but the salary's steady, and I've always been good at saving. I've lived in the same drafty rental duplex for 12 years, writing rent checks that felt more like a monthly donation to someone else's future. It wasn't much of a life, but it kept me focused on one thing: owning a place that was mine, a real home. That goal had driven me for years, through promotions, budget cuts, and two bosses I would have gladly locked in a supply closet. I gave up vacations, skipped happy hours, and learned to stretch groceries like a magician. And finally, I did it. I had enough saved for a down payment. I could afford a mortgage. I had a pre-approval letter from the bank and a realtor who wasn't trying to push condos above my price range. Everything was finally moving. Except, as fate would have it, the very week I needed my car most, it died. Not a flat tire, not a weird rattle, completely dead. The mechanic said it needed a full transmission rebuild, and I was looking at 3 weeks before they could even get the part. So I was stuck using rideshare apps, spending more than I wanted just getting to work and back. But I wasn't about to let that stop me. Not now. I figured I'd make it work. My parents live about 45 minutes outside the city in a small town no one ever leaves on purpose. Dad works part-time doing building maintenance at a factory, and Mom's been a library assistant since before the internet was a thing. They're both solid, dependable people, though they've always had a weird blind spot when it comes to my younger brother, Reed. Reed's 31, but lives like he's 19. He floats between jobs, either quitting because he wasn't respected or getting fired for not showing up. Every time he lands something new, my parents throw a miniature parade, and every time it implodes, they find someone else to blame. I stopped keeping track after the 12th job in 5 years. That weekend, I headed to their place for Sunday dinner. It's something we've done on and off for years, a family tradition that only half of us seem to care about. I figured it would be a good time to tell them I was house hunting. I wasn't expecting a celebration, but I thought maybe they'd be happy for me. When I arrived, Reed was already there, planted on the couch in sweatpants, locked into some action movie loud enough to rattle the windows. We sat down to dinner. Mom made roast chicken with those frozen rolls she pretends are homemade, and halfway through, I took a breath and made my announcement. I've saved enough for a down payment, I said, and I've been working with a realtor to find something in my range. Mom blinked like I'd spoken in code. Oh, wow, honey. That's wonderful. How much are you looking to spend? Dad asked before I could answer. I told them I was looking at houses around $478,000, enough for something solid without stretching myself too thin. That was when Reed's eyes finally lifted from his plate. Up to that moment, I wasn't sure he even realized we were at the table together. You said your car's in the shop, right? He asked suddenly. I'm not working right now, so I could drive you around to see places. I wasn't sure how to respond. Reed offering help was like spotting a dolphin in the grocery store. You'd wonder if you were hallucinating. But I nodded. That's actually really nice of you. I mean, I've seen a lot of houses, he said, suddenly full of confidence. I can tell when something's off, you know? I'll help make sure no one scams you. It was unexpected, but maybe he was trying. For all his flaws, maybe Reed was finally stepping up, finally doing something that wasn't just about him. I had my doubts, but I agreed. I told him I had a viewing the next afternoon, and if he was serious, I'd text him the address. The next day, he actually showed up. Early, even. He pulled up in his beat-up Honda, music playing, and waved like we were on our way to Disneyland. I climbed in, half expecting him to bail after one house, but he didn't. We saw 3 places that afternoon. None of them were right. But he had good questions. He noticed things. And I'll admit, I was surprised. Over the next 2 weeks, we probably looked at a dozen more homes. My realtor set up the appointments, and Reed drove me to every one of them. And he wasn't just there to kill time. He pointed out warped floors, sketchy basements, cheap windows pretending to be fancy. At one house that looked beautiful from the outside, he made me stop in the bathroom. Delia, check out the tile near the toilet, he said, crouching down. Smell that? Something's wrong here. I bent down, and sure enough, there was a faint sewage stench. The floor tiles felt soft underfoot. We checked the basement, and there it was, mildew, water damage, and a smell that said no way. The realtor tried to brush it off, said it was old plumbing, common stuff, but Reed shook his head. You'd spend a fortune fixing this. We left, and I was grateful. He did that more than once. At another house, he pointed out tiny cracks running along the baseboard that I hadn't even noticed. That's settling, he said. But this much means foundation issues. You'll be underwater before you even unpack. I had to admit, for a guy who couldn't hold a job, he had a solid eye for problems. Finally, after days of driving and disappointments, we found it. A one-story place on a quiet street with old oak trees and neighbors who waved from their porches. It was priced right at $478,000. The roof was new, the inspection was clean, and I felt it in my gut the second we walked in. This was the one. I told the realtor I wanted to make an offer that afternoon. A week later, the paperwork was signed. I was holding the keys to a house with my name on the deed. My house. It didn't feel real. Then, the very next morning, my manager pulled me into her office. A big client in Austin needed someone on site, someone reliable, and she said I was it. I didn't even have time to unpack the boxes still in my trunk. I'd be gone for 2 weeks, starting tomorrow. I thought about it for a second, then called Reed that night. I need a favor, I said. Could you go over to the house and change the locks? I'll pick up the new keys when I'm back. No problem, he said, easy as ever. I've got it. 2 weeks later, I landed back in Cleveland just before noon on a gray, overcast Friday. I was drained from the trip, 2 weeks of endless meetings, late-night presentations, and trying to keep a client from jumping ship. But as tired as I was, all I could think about was finally stepping into my house, and just breathing. I wanted to open a bottle of wine, sit on the empty living room floor, and think about curtains and paint colors and what kind of couch would go best with the sunlight in the back room. It was going to be the first night of something new. As soon as I dropped my suitcase at my apartment, I called Reed to get the keys. He picked up after the third ring, sounding strangely casual, almost too casual. I told him I was back and ready to pick them up. There was this weird pause on the line, long enough to make my stomach clench. Actually, he said finally, I can't give you the keys right now. I blinked. At first, I thought maybe he was joking or being annoying on purpose. What do you mean, you can't give them to me? Well, he said, dragging the word out like he was searching for the right spin. I moved in while you were gone. With Sabrina. Just temporary. You know, until we get settled. You'd just interfere with us right now. It took me a full 5 seconds to register what he had just said. I stood there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear like it might change the words if I waited long enough. Reed, it's not your house. It's mine. I bought it. Yeah, but I talked to Mom and Dad. He said, like that somehow changed anything. They said it was okay for me to stay. They totally understand our situation. My hands were shaking. I felt something twist in my chest, like all the air had been sucked out of the room. You need to give me my keys and get out of my house. Now. He laughed. I swear to God, he actually laughed like this was funny or dramatic theater. Relax, Delia. It's not a big deal. I've already talked to Mom. She's cool with it. Just chill. I didn't respond. I hung up the phone, threw on my coat, and called a rideshare. My car was still in the shop. All I could think during that entire 25-minute ride was that he had no right. No right to be there. No right to treat something I worked for like it was his backup plan. I didn't care if he had Sabrina or a whole circus in that house. He was leaving. When I got there, I jumped out of the car before it even fully stopped. I went straight to the door and knocked, hard, again and again. I could hear movement inside, footsteps, muffled voices. They were definitely home. I kept knocking. I called his name. Nothing. After 5 minutes of that, I shouted through the door. If you don't open this door right now, I'm calling the police. You're not a tenant. You're not on the mortgage. You're illegally in my house. Everything went quiet inside. Then my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Delia, honey, what's going on? She asked in that sweet, artificial voice she used when she didn't want to admit someone had done something wrong. Mom, Reed won't let me into my house. He changed the locks like I asked, but now he's decided to move in. He says you told him it was okay. She hesitated for a second, then sighed like I was the one causing a scene. Now, Delia, calm down. Come over here so we can talk this through like adults. I'm calling the police if he doesn't come out. This is ridiculous. Don't you dare, she snapped, voice hard now. This is a family matter. You don't involve outsiders in family problems. Get in a cab and come here now. I could barely breathe. I was so angry. But I did what she said. Not because I was giving in, but because I needed to hear them say it to my face. I needed to see if they really believed this insanity. 20 minutes later, I was at my parents' house, standing in the entryway like I was 16 again and had missed curfew. I want to know if it's true, I said, skipping any small talk. Did you really tell Reed he could live in my house? They looked at each other, then Mom nodded. It's true, but he's not stealing anything. He just needs a place for a little while. He's got a girlfriend now, and they need privacy. It's just temporary. I stared at her. I bought that house. I'm paying the mortgage. He has no job and no right. You have an apartment for 2 more months, Dad said, jumping in with his reasonable voice. Reed doesn't have anywhere else. Just give him a little time to figure things out. No, I said. Absolutely not. That is not normal. You don't just let someone live in a house they don't own. Mom folded her arms and gave me the guilt face. You've always been the responsible one. We're just asking you to help your brother. 2 months, that's all. Dad gave me the warm fatherly look he always used when he wanted me to cave. You've helped him before, sweetheart. He's trying now. He just needs a hand. The worst part? They really believed it. They thought it was reasonable for me to keep paying for a house my unemployed brother had claimed as his own. They thought I was being selfish by saying no. Fine, I said through clenched teeth. 2 months. Then he's out. Not a day more. Mom smiled like I just handed over a kidney. Thank you, honey. I knew you'd understand. I walked out of that house without saying goodbye. When I got back to my apartment, there was a text from Reed waiting for me. Thanks, sis. Really appreciate it. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I owned a house. I'd worked for it. And somehow, I was the one asking for permission to step inside it. I tried to move on, to focus on work and pretend this wasn't eating me alive. But after 3 days, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to see it with my own eyes. My car had finally been repaired, so I drove over without calling. When I pulled up, everything looked normal. But when I knocked, Reed answered like it was completely natural. Hey, Delia, he said, smiling like we were old pals. Come on in. I stepped inside and immediately saw her. Sabrina was lounging on the couch like she owned the place, wearing a silk robe and sipping something from a fancy mug. Oh, you're the sister, she said, glancing up from her phone. Jake told me about you. Next time, you should really call first. We were about to head out. I blinked. Call first? This is my house. She shrugged, unconcerned. Yeah, well, we live here now. So we've got our routine. It's just respectful. I could feel the blood rushing to my face. This is not your space. I'm paying for this house. She didn't even flinch. That's between you and your bank. But right now, this is our home. Before I could completely explode, Reed grabbed my arm and pulled me into the kitchen. Please don't start with her, he said. She's just protective of our space. Our space? Reed, this isn't your space. I know, but can you just go with it? It's temporary. I closed my eyes, took a breath, and said, I want a set of keys. And no parties. I'm serious. He opened a drawer and handed me a spare. Got it. No parties. I took the keys, walked past Sabrina without another word, and left. I'd agreed to 2 months. But I was starting to feel like every day was going to stretch me thinner than the last. A few weeks went by, and I kept telling myself to be patient, to breathe through it, and just let the clock run out. I told myself that once the 2 months were up, I'd get the house back, and Reed would be gone. I tried to focus on work and ignore the constant buzz in the back of my head reminding me that I was still paying every cent of that mortgage while someone else played house inside my walls. But something about it all started gnawing at me more and more with every passing day. Then I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, Reed's old friend Corey, the kind of guy who always seemed to have a new scheme or hustle. He called like nothing was weird, just jumped right into it with, Hey Delia, you going to Reed's housewarming party tomorrow? I actually had to sit down. What housewarming party? I asked, already feeling cold in my stomach. Corey laughed like it was obvious. For his new house. He said you helped him get it, that you were co-signing or something. He told everyone he's finally got his own place, so we're celebrating. 7 o'clock. Bring a bottle. I didn't answer him. I just hung up the phone and sat there staring at the wall for a good 5 minutes. Reed wasn't just squatting in my house. He was telling people it belonged to him. He was throwing a party in my house, which I explicitly told him not to do. And now I was the idiot funding it all. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in bed picturing Reed walking around my living room, acting like he earned it, like he deserved it, while his friends toasted him as a success story. I kept hearing the words, finally got his own place, over and over. And every time I did, it made my skin crawl. The next evening, I didn't knock. I used my spare key and walked straight into my own home. The music was loud, the kind of bass that makes the floors tremble, and there were at least 30 people inside, laughing, drinking, dancing like it was their place. I stood there in the entryway for a second, letting it all sink in. Someone even tried to hand me a drink. I made my way through the crowd and found Reed in the kitchen, holding a beer and bragging to a group of guys I'd never seen before. He was in full performance mode, talking loud enough to be heard over the music. I saved up for 5 years, he was saying, chest puffed out. Had to hustle, but I finally got here. My sister helped with some of the paperwork, but the place is all mine now. That was the moment something broke in me. I stepped forward, cleared my throat, and waited until every one of them turned around and saw me standing there. Reed froze. His smile collapsed like someone had ripped the air out of him. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just looked at him and said, "Tell them the truth." He pulled me into the hallway fast, whispering harshly, "Don't do this right now. Please." Some of those guys are potential business partners. I had to say something that sounded impressive. I stared at him. Impressive? You're lying about owning my house. He waved it off. It's just temporary. I swear. I was going to tell them eventually. I shook my head. You threw a party after I told you not to. You're pretending this house is yours, Reed. He glanced toward the living room. Just give me 1 more hour. Don't ruin it, Delia. That was when he snapped. If you say anything, I'll call Mom and Dad. You know they'll take my side. They always do. He said it like a threat, and I think he meant it that way. But what shocked me more than the words was the tone in his voice. It wasn't desperate or ashamed, it was smug. Then came the line I'll never forget. Mom actually thinks you should just give it to me. Permanently. I blinked. What are you talking about? He looked me right in the eye. She said it would make sense. You're older. You've got a good job. I've got Sabrina now. We're talking about getting married. We need this place to start our life. I couldn't even respond. I just turned around and walked out the door. On the way to my car, I called Mom. Did you really tell Reed he should keep my house? I asked. Yes, she said calmly, like we were discussing the weather. You're established, honey. Reed needs a start. He's trying, and you should be proud of him. He's in love, and they want a future together. And who's paying the mortgage while he builds this future? I asked. You, of course, she said, like it was the most natural answer in the world. He doesn't have a steady job right now. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just hung up the phone and drove straight to my apartment. I didn't even take my shoes off when I got home. I just started packing. Not because I was leaving, but because I was done pretending any of this was normal. Reed had made his move, and I was about to make mine. That night, I couldn't sleep, but for once it wasn't because I was anxious. It was because I was focused. I made a list of everything I needed to do. I called the locksmith first thing in the morning and told him I'd meet him at the house later that day. I didn't even bother calling Reed. I knew he'd be out. He always slept in late on weekends. By the time I got there, the locksmith was already waiting. You want all the locks changed? He asked. Every single one, I said. And make them good. While he worked, I started bringing in boxes from my car. I packed everything I needed to stay, my clothes, toiletries, some bedding, my laptop, and a few personal things. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was moving in. Once the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I locked the front door, then went upstairs and started collecting everything that didn't belong to me. Reed and Sabrina's stuff wasn't much, but it was scattered: clothes, shoes, hair products, some electronics, even a tacky painting that looked like it came from a motel lobby. I threw everything into garbage bags and carried them outside. I lined them up neatly on the front lawn. I went back inside, locked the door again, and sat on the floor of my living room with a cup of coffee. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Around 6 that evening, I heard a car pull up, then yelling, then pounding on the door. I walked upstairs and cracked open the front window. Reed was on the porch with Sabrina, staring at the garbage bags. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. "Why is our stuff on the lawn?" "You don't live here," I said calmly. "Get off my property." Sabrina looked like she was about to scream. "You can't just throw people's things outside. This is illegal." "No, what's illegal is occupying a house you don't own and pretending it's yours." Reed pulled out his phone and started calling someone. 2 minutes later, mine rang. It was Mom. "Delia Marie, you let your brother back into that house right now." "No, Mom. I won't. If you don't, we're done. We will never speak to you again." "Then I guess we're done," I said, and I hung up. They stayed outside yelling for a while. Then Reed shouted something about how I'd regret this. I didn't respond. I just stood at the window and watched as they finally got in the car and drove away. And just like that, for the first time since I signed the mortgage, my house was finally mine. After I kicked them out, I expected a storm right away, maybe even a full-scale meltdown from Reed and my parents. But oddly enough, the first few days were quiet. Too quiet, honestly. I worked from home, kept my doors locked, ordered groceries online, and didn't leave the house unless it was absolutely necessary. I wasn't taking any chances. I'd seen enough of Reed's manipulative games to know that silence didn't mean peace, it just meant he was thinking. The house felt empty at first. There were no curtains yet, barely any furniture, and my footsteps echoed through the hallways. But every echo reminded me that the space was mine, that I'd taken it back on my own terms. There was no better feeling than walking into a room and knowing no one could tell me to leave. I painted the walls the shade of green I'd always loved, played music loud without judgment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could exhale fully. I tried to focus on work, but I kept expecting something to happen. I kept checking the front door camera feed, kept waiting for a message from my mom or some drama explosion from Reed. But nothing came. And just when I let myself believe maybe they had accepted it and moved on, it all went sideways again. It was Thursday afternoon, around 3, and I was sitting in my makeshift office going over some reports. Everything was calm until I heard a strange, slow scratching sound coming from the front of the house. Not knocking, not tapping. A kind of steady metal-on-metal whisper that immediately sent adrenaline through my chest. I moved quietly to the upstairs window and looked down. And there he was, Reed, crouched by the front door, fiddling with something that looked suspiciously like lock-picking tools. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was so focused, so calm, like he had every right to be there, like it was just another task on his to-do list. I didn't wait. I picked up the phone and called 911. My voice was shaking, but I kept it together long enough to say, "There's a man trying to break into my house. He's using tools to pick the lock. I know him, but he doesn't live here. He's trespassing." The dispatcher stayed on the line with me until the police arrived, which thankfully didn't take long. I stayed at the window, heart pounding, watching him keep working, totally unaware that help was already on the way. 2 officers pulled up quietly in an unmarked car. They approached slowly from both sides, and one of them called out, "Sir, what exactly are you doing?" Reed jumped like a guilty child caught red-handed. "Oh, hey, officers. This is my house. I live here. I just locked myself out. My sister changed the locks on me while I was gone." That was my cue. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. "Officers, I'm the homeowner. He doesn't live here, and he's not allowed to be here. I have the title, and I have the documents to prove it." One of the officers turned to Reed. "Sir, do you have any documents showing residence here? Any ID with this address?" Reed's face tightened. "No, but my name should be on the system somewhere. I've lived here for weeks." "Because you squatted here," I snapped. He moved in without my permission while I was out of town and refused to leave. I had to throw his stuff on the lawn. Now he's trying to break in. The officer looked back at Reed, then glanced down at the tools in his hand. "Sir, you're in possession of burglary tools and have no documentation to prove legal residence. I'm placing you under arrest." That was it. They cuffed him right there on my front step. He looked shocked, like the world had turned upside down. "Delia, you're seriously letting them arrest me? I'm your brother. You're also a grown man trying to pick the lock on a house you don't own." As they led him to the cruiser, he turned his head and shouted, "You're going to regret this. This isn't over." I shut the door and stood behind it, hands trembling. But I wasn't scared. Not this time. I was furious. I was done being the family scapegoat. I was done being the responsible one who was expected to just take it. A couple of hours later, the phone rang. It was Mom, and her voice? Absolutely livid. "How dare you have your brother arrested? What is wrong with you? You call the police and treat him like a criminal. He was trying to break into my house with tools. What did you want me to do? Bake him a pie? He's your brother," she said, as if that explained everything. "Family doesn't call the police. You deal with things privately. You mean let him take what he wants and never hold him accountable? Yeah, I'm done with that. You call the station and drop the charges," she ordered. "No, I won't. He's not my problem anymore." She hung up on me. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. That weekend, I found out through a cousin that my parents had bailed Reed out. Apparently, he was back living with them, sulking like a grounded teenager. I also found out that Mom was telling everyone I had betrayed the family, that I'd stolen Reed's house, and then had him arrested for no reason. According to her, I tricked him into thinking he was welcome, then set him up to look like a criminal. She was spinning it like some kind of betrayal out of a soap opera, and people were believing it. I started getting weird looks from extended relatives. One even messaged me to say, "Maybe you should have handled it more quietly. Blood's thicker than water." I didn't respond. Let them think what they want. They weren't paying the bills or answering the door to lock-picking brothers. Sabrina, meanwhile, had disappeared from the picture entirely. Word was she dumped him less than 2 weeks after he got arrested. Apparently, life with no house, no job, and a criminal record wasn't exactly her dream scenario. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. The truth was, I was okay. For the first time in years, I was really okay. The house was peaceful, mine again, and I no longer felt like I was drowning in guilt or obligation. I started gardening in the mornings before work, painting more rooms on the weekends, and planning upgrades for the kitchen. I was living in a space that reflected me, and no one was around to invade it or disrespect it. It's strange how silence, after so much noise, starts to sound like freedom. It no longer felt like I was waiting for a fight or recovering from one. I was just living. It had been just over 3 months since Reed was arrested for trying to break into my house, and honestly, life had never felt quieter or better. I didn't hear from my parents, and I didn't expect to. They'd made it perfectly clear that their loyalty had limits, and I'd crossed the line by defending what was mine. The silence was their punishment, but for me, it felt like peace. I'd gotten used to the stillness, the normalcy. I spent more time focusing on my job, started waking up earlier just to enjoy a cup of coffee in my sunroom, and even took up weekend painting projects. I picked out a soft blue for the kitchen, a deep terracotta for the entryway, and finally, a calming gray-green for the bedroom. My house was becoming mine in every sense, not just on paper. Work had taken a turn too. I was more focused, sharper, and with the drama behind me, I started getting recognition. My manager mentioned a possible promotion during a one-on-one meeting, and I could feel things shifting. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was starting to thrive. Then one afternoon, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A thick white envelope with no return address. I opened it slowly, unsure what I was about to find. Inside was a grainy photocopy of what looked like a rental agreement, my address at the top, Reed's name scribbled on the signature line, backdated by a few months. Stapled to it was a note written in messy handwriting. "You should know what he was planning. He told me it was a backup plan if you fought him. Said he could prove he lived there and maybe win the place. I left before it got worse. Good luck." There was no name, but I knew exactly who it was from, Sabrina. It made perfect sense. She vanished right after the arrest, and now I knew why. Reed had been planning a legal move the entire time. He'd forged a rental agreement, probably to make it look like he had tenant rights, like I couldn't just throw him out. It explained why he was so calm, so smug. He had a plan, and if I hadn't caught him breaking in, he might have tried to sue me. My hands were shaking as I read through the copy again. It was amateur, full of spelling errors and using a generic online template, but it still made my skin crawl. If I hadn't acted when I did, if I had hesitated even one more week, there's a chance he might have dragged me into court. The idea of him winning even the smallest legal advantage made me sick. The next day, I called a lawyer. I explained everything: his unauthorized occupancy, the break-in, the forged lease I'd just received. She told me I'd done the right thing from the beginning, but she also said something that made my stomach turn. He was probably planning to build a squatter's rights case. It's rare, but people try it, especially when they've got nothing to lose. I asked her if there was anything else I needed to do. She said to hang on to the document everything, and let her know immediately if Reed tried anything else. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in my car for a long time, just watching the rain hit the windshield. I wanted to believe that was the end of it, that the forged lease was just a last desperate act from someone who had finally run out of moves. But life doesn't like to tie things up that neatly. Exactly 1 week later, I got a call from the same lawyer. Her tone was urgent, clipped. "Delia, I need you to know something. Your brother has been arrested again, this time for identity theft." I sat completely still. "What?" "He used your name and personal information to apply for multiple credit cards. It looks like he tried to open a utility account too, all while claiming to be you." I felt like I'd been punched. I knew Reed was reckless, selfish, even cruel, but this was something else. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't laziness or delusion. This was straight up criminal. I asked what happened next. She said the investigation had started when one of the banks flagged his application and noticed discrepancies. It led to a background check, and once they connected it to his previous arrest, everything unraveled. His fingerprints, his face, and his lies, it all added up. He was being held in county jail, and the charges were serious. I drove home from that meeting in a daze. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh or scream. There was something nauseating about realizing someone you grew up with, someone who sat beside you at the dinner table for years, had tried to steal not just your house but your actual identity. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying everything, every sign I'd ignored, every moment I gave him the benefit of the doubt, every second I thought maybe he was trying. All of it was a lie. The truth was he never saw me as his sister. He saw me as a resource, a backup plan, a safety net he could stretch until it broke. A few days later, I went to the courthouse to make a formal statement. I didn't want to. I didn't want to sit there and recount everything to a stranger in a suit. But I did. I told the truth, and I made sure it was clear this wasn't a family squabble. This was fraud, and it wasn't going to be brushed aside. When I walked out of that building, I saw him. Reed. He was in cuffs, being led down the hallway by 2 officers. His face was gaunt, eyes dark, but when he saw me, something flickered. Not shame, not remorse, just bitterness. You didn't have to do this, he spat. I just wanted what was mine. I stood still, watching him be dragged away like a stranger. You never earned anything, I said quietly. Not the house, not my trust, not a damn thing. And I meant it. 2 weeks later, I got a promotion at work. Senior account director. A significant raise, better hours, and a new office with a window that overlooked the city skyline. It felt surreal. I celebrated by buying new living room furniture, my first real splurge since buying the house. A few months went by. I heard from a cousin that Reed was still in jail awaiting trial and that my parents were still blaming me for everything. I didn't care anymore. I didn't miss the phone calls. I didn't miss the guilt trips. I didn't miss being the dependable one who got nothing in return. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I saw his name pop up on my phone. A text message. I stared at it for a while before opening it. Hey Delia, I've been thinking. I know things got out of hand. Maybe we could talk sometime. Clear the air. I didn't respond. I didn't even think about it. Later that evening, while I was making dinner, I got a second text from an unknown number this time. It was a selfie. A woman I didn't recognize, holding up a sign that read, "Tell Delia I forgive her." I stared at it for a full minute. Then another message came through. He says he's sorry. He wants to start over. He's changed. I blocked the number. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting off my family. I always tell them the same thing. I don't regret the decision. I regret that they made it necessary. They showed me exactly who they were the second they sided with a liar over someone who had done nothing but work, sacrifice, and provide. And now, I live in peace. I wake up in a house that is fully mine, legally and emotionally. I don't worry about surprise visitors. I don't worry about guilt. I plant flowers in the backyard and think about painting the front door red this fall. Because I can. The past still tries to call sometimes, but I've learned how to stop answering.